In the middle of the Wild West plains, another kind of renegade was born. Alongside gunslingers and outlaws, women took center stage and left marks that time couldn't erase. They challenged traditions, planned heists, and escaped like no one else. In today's video, you'll meet 10 of these leading figures who turned crime into legend. Pearl Hart. In the deserts of Arizona, the name Pearl Hart spread from mouth to mouth, the bandit queen, who dared to rob a stagecoach and become a legend. In May of 1899, with no money to support her child, she teamed up with her partner Joe Boot and chose the route between Globe and Florence. Disguised as a man, she stopped the carriage, took the driver's gun, gathered the passengers' bags, and left with $418. Before leaving, she gave each passenger $1 so they could buy food when they reached town. The duo didn't get far. Caught soon after, Boot got 30 years in prison. Pearl was sentenced to 7, not for the robbery itself, but for taking the driver's revolver. In prison, she staged a short escape, made easier by sympathetic guards, but was quickly recaptured. Sometime later, she became pregnant. The fact weighed on local politics, and in 1902, the territorial governor granted her a pardon. Once free, her trail scatters into different versions. Some say Pearl took to the stage to cash in on her fame. Others claim she chose a quieter life, that she lived with farmer Calvin Bywater and eventually put away her pistol in disguises. Between myth and court records remains the figure who crossed the boundary of the law and left behind questions that still echo. Eleanor Dumont. At 21, coming from New Orleans, Eleanor Dumont arrived in California and found at the blackjack tables the stage for her talent. In the 1850s, her work as a dealer made her a striking presence in San Francisco, where her skill with the cards and her posture drew in both customers and onlookers. With clear rules and a firm voice, she earned respect even from those who lost. At the Bella Union, however, she left under accusations of cheating. She chose to move on, heading to Nevada City. She carried with her both her reputation and a clientele that followed her from town to town. There, she became an attraction for the miners, who saw in her steady hands and sharp gaze the promise of a fair game. But success wasn't a straight line. In Carson City, Eleanor got involved with Jack McKnight, who secretly sold her properties and disappeared with the money. Betrayed, she confronted him and killed him, an act that would mark her life story. After that, her star at the tables began to fade. The nickname Madame Mustache, given for the faint shadow on her lip, spoke louder than her once respected past. Between moving from town to town and nights that grew longer, her luck ran out. In 1879, weighed down by debts and exhaustion, she ended her story by mixing wine with morphine. Her path brings together rise, disillusion, and a dark ending, a portrait of the West where glamour and risk shared the same table. Lillian Frances Smith. She stepped onto the scene with a rifle in her hands and another aim in mind, to rewrite the script of her time. Still a teenager, she racked up achievements, but her main target wasn't metal plates. It was rigid traditions. At 14, she joined Buffalo Bill's Wild West show and took on the persona of Winona, introduced as a Native American princess. The role, combined with her precision, put her in the spotlight. The comparison with Annie Oakley, more reserved and already celebrated, sparked a rivalry. Lillian chose confrontation, stage presence, a firm voice, and refusal to accept the place expected for women. When the tension grew, she left the show, but not the road. She continued touring the country, reinventing herself with each opportunity and keeping audiences hooked on the crack of her shots. In 1930, when she died, she was buried in Sioux attire, a final gesture that sums up her journey, an artist who used marksmanship to clear a path, cross boundaries, and leave behind a legacy that can't be contained by targets. Rose Dunn. They called her the Rose of Cimarron. Before the nickname became legend, Rose Dunn was a young woman from a well-known family in the neighborhood, sister to boys who crossed the lines where the law grew weak. Through them, she met the Dalton gang, and between hideouts and messages, she found George Bitter Creek Newcomb. It wasn't just attraction, it was a pact. He saw determination in her gaze, and between laughter and plans, gave her the name that would spread across the prairies. The turning point came in 1893, during a shootout in Oklahoma. Rose didn't hesitate. She ran through open fire, handed a rifle to Newcomb, and made it back alive. The act, retold from ranch to ranch, made her a symbol of loyalty, a priceless currency on the frontier. But the wheel never stops. 2 years later, the same family that had brought her close to Newcomb sealed the break. Her brothers turned him over to the authorities. The capture was swift, and death was certain. With the body of her lover, Rose's first life came to an end as well. From the dust of robberies, she moved on to a new landscape. She married an Oklahoma politician and traded the tension of getaways for days of open doors, town talk, voting, and harvest. There was no magical absolution. There was choice, repeated every morning, to go on without the sound of guns. Her story crosses extremes, passion and loss, bravery and new beginnings. More than just a frontier romance, it's a reminder of how place and ties can bend destinies, turning the girl from the crossfire into a woman of civic life, without the past ever stopping its whisper of her name along the roads of the West. Kate Horany. Remembered as Miss Doc Holliday, she built her own path far beyond the role of a gunslinger's companion. Born in Hungary around 1850, her life changed when Emperor Maximilian, whom her father served as a surgeon, was overthrown. The family crossed the Atlantic and started over in Iowa, United States. The new land didn't bring peace. Kate lost her parents and later her husband and child to yellow fever. Faced with grief, she chose to move forward. She headed to Dodge City, a tough frontier where only the stubborn endured. In 1875, a meeting with Wyatt Earp opened another door. Through him, Kate met Doc Holliday, the notorious dentist with whom she would live an intense relationship, full of partnership, clashes, and reconciliations. Kate's loyalty wasn't just talk. When Holliday was jailed after a gambling fight, she acted on her own. She set fire to a shed to cause confusion, confronted the jailer, and demanded her partner's release. The plan worked. In that act, she showed not only courage but also a rare willingness to take risks for the one she chose to stand beside. In time, the couple moved to Tombstone, the stage for the future OK Corral shootout. As tensions grew, Holliday insisted that Kate leave the city. She agreed. The decision kept her safe but also marked the beginning of the end of their union, which had survived so many crossroads. Apart, they continued to carry the marks of a life lived on the edge. The following years were quieter. Mary Catherine Horany, her birth name, found refuge at the Arizona Pioneer Home, where she could slow down and gather memories. She lived to the age of 89, an unlikely longevity for someone who had endured epidemics, displacement, and the gunpowder of conflict. Her journey, marked by loss, firm choices, and decisive actions, left its own trail in the Old West, that of a woman who refused invisibility and wrote her own story. Etta Place. She went down in history as a shadow beside the Sundance Kid and Butch Cassidy. At the dawn of the 20th century, her name spread through saloons and newspapers, sometimes as a skilled accomplice, other times as someone who knew how to vanish before the noose tightened. The trail usually begins in a San Antonio brothel, a setting that shaped her discretion and surrounded her with rumors. Over time, records grew scarce and her biography turned into a puzzle. Some claim that Etta and Ann Bassett were the same person, a theory that adds another twist to the mystery. What never faded was her reputation for efficiency. When the gang was on the run, she was the one who organized horse swaps and adjusted the route. She anticipated chases, read the terrain, and kept calm while dust covered the tracks. There were also stories that she safeguarded part of the money on her own, holding it steady until the group could regroup. She wasn't an ornament in the tale. She kept the machine running when every second counted. Under growing pressure, Etta, Harry Longabaugh, and Robert Leroy Parker crossed borders. Argentina offered distance and a bit of relief, but the quiet didn't last. A bank robbery on foreign soil proved that flight doesn't close the cycle. It only changes the map. After that, the trail led to Bolivia. There, the story seems to end for her partners. Reports say they were overtaken and gunned down by cavalry, a blunt full stop for a duo already worn down. But what about Etta? Did she die in the same shootout? Or did she find her way back, dissolving her past until she became just another anonymous neighbor in some western town? Between versions, the question that fuels the myth remains. How does the life end of someone who mastered the art of disappearing without a trace, and yet still echoes in every story of outlaw freedom? Pearl de Vere. She held a unique place in the Old West. Born in Chicago and raised in Indiana, she headed west in the late 1870s, when new towns were springing up. In Denver, she adopted the identity of Mrs. Isabel Martin, a strategy that secured her both clients and discretion. The good times collapsed with the silver crash of 1893, and the only way forward was to move on. Her next stop was booming Cripple Creek. In the red light district, Pearl opened an entertainment house and made it thrive. She knew how to deal with the local elite and set rules that protected the women who worked with her. There was health care, safety guidelines, and one central rule: no one worked under coercion. That mix of management and care gave the place a rare reputation. Her private life was handled with caution. Her family back in Indiana still believed she made her living as a seamstress. In 1895, to strengthen a respectable profile, she married industrialist C.B. Flynn. Shortly after, a fire destroyed the house she ran and also hit her husband's factory. The marriage didn't survive. Flynn left for Mexico. Pearl stayed, determined to start over. She started over in a big way. She opened the old homestead, with clear organization and a strict code of conduct. In no time, the new parlor became a landmark. By June 1897, the parties hosted by Pearl attracted businessmen, politicians, and visitors, cementing the homestead as the heart of Cripple Creek's social life. But intensity had a price. After a night of celebration, Pearl suffered from relentless insomnia and turned to laudanum, then common as a painkiller. At dawn, she was found lifeless in her room. Her sudden death closed the chapter of a woman who mastered the rules of her time, cared for her own, and built a respected business in the middle of the gold boom. In Cripple Creek, she was remembered as a woman who knew how to reinvent herself and turn a stigmatized trade into a space of protection and dignified work. Laura Bullion. Daughter of outlaw Henry Bullion, Laura entered the underworld early. At 13, she grew close to Ben Kilpatrick, the tall Texan, and William Carver, trusted names in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids gang. She earned a nickname that stuck: the Rose of the Wild Bunch. More than just a sidekick, she handled logistics, forging signatures, preparing documents, and clearing the way for robberies that made headlines. The peak came in July 1901 with the Great Northern Train robbery. The heist brought in about $60,000, but the shine of that feat didn't last. Just days later, Laura was caught carrying $8,500 in counterfeit bills. Tried, she was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison and came to know firsthand the price of criminal fame. After leaving prison, she changed course. Quietly, she ended her partnership with adventure and chose anonymity. She lived discreetly until settling in Memphis, Tennessee. There, she grew old far from her former companions and stories of gunpowder. She died on December 2, 1961, of natural causes. Her name remained as part of a legend. The girl who grew up among outlaws, took part in a major heist, and later chose to disappear from the stage. Sally Skull. She holds a curious place in the imagination of the Old West, at once a flesh-and-blood person and a campfire legend. Born Sally Newman in 1817 in Illinois, she was still a child when the Newmans packed everything up and headed for the frontier. The journey didn't offer a peaceful childhood. By the age of 6, Sally already understood that in that world, caution and quick action could mean the difference between life and death. The episode that carved this lesson into her memory came early. One night, a stranger tried to break into the family's cabin. Her mother, without hesitation, struck back through the window and chopped off the intruder's fingers when he groped for the latch. The brutal scene stayed with Sally and taught her that with the law far away and danger close by, it was family itself that did the protecting. Out of that environment grew a young woman who became practical, calculating, and used to making decisions under pressure. Over time, the girl earned a reputation for never backing down. It's said that when threats loomed over the neighborhood, she knocked on the door of a man who refused to act. She asked for his gun. She told him that if he wouldn't fight, she would. It wasn't bravado. It was her way of understanding responsibility in a place where help never came. In 1833, Sally married Jesse Robinson, whose bravery in local conflicts against native tribes had impressed her. It was a decade of ordinary life by frontier standards, but the marriage ended. Robinson would be the first of a string of partners. Next came George Scull, John Doyle, and Isaiah Watkins. All three died young, each in his own way, and the coincidences fueled whispers in nearby towns. Nothing was ever proven, but the string of deaths around Sally was enough for mystery to cling to her name. Her reputation then took on a life of its own. In the stories that traveled with wagons and trading posts, she became the woman who braved dangers and outlived her husbands. Popular exaggeration did the rest. Around fireplaces, parents wrapped up late-night games with a half-joking, half-serious warning, "Behave or Sally Scull will show up." And so, a frontier woman turned into a boogeyman. Her final years are even murkier. Rumors spread that her last husband, driven by greed, plotted her death to seize her money and property. There's no proof, only talk, and that's exactly what keeps the legend alive. Most likely, Sally disappeared without official record, like so many in that vast territory, and the absence of facts left room for ever more dramatic tales. What remains is a figure shaped by silences, a girl hardened at her family's cabin door, a woman who took on decisions others avoided, and a character that frontier stories enlarged until she filled the size of myth. Between what can be proven and what is only repeated, one certainty endures. Sally Scull wasn't just a subject of Western lore. She was a real product of a time when life, raw and unfiltered, demanded immediate choices. Sadie Marcus. They say some names seem to carry dust in their letters. Sadie Marcus is one of them. Her story crosses the Old West with a determined step, guided by a will too big to be contained inside a home. At 17, when many were still hesitant, she packed her bag and joined a traveling theater company. The stage became both her school and her road. She learned to read audiences, switch masks, travel light, and keep her craft alive with practice and courage. It wasn't escape, it was choice. But the script rarely follows the plan. Soon enough, Sadie took another direction that defied her parents and all expectations. She set out for Tombstone, Arizona, a town of dry winds, gambling tables, and low talk in saloons. There, she grew close to Johnny Behan, a man with smooth words and high ambition. The involvement opened doors and left wounds. It was a raw lesson. Promises made at nightfall don't always last until morning. When everything seemed settled, the twist came that would change her story. Wyatt Earp. His reputation arrived before he did. A lawman turned outlaw hunter, used to hard crossings and quick decisions. The meeting between the two wasn't lightning. It was an ember that grew quietly. Respect came before romance, partnership before portraits. Against the whispers of convention, they built a life of their own, with only rare pauses amid the noise of gunfire and the headlines that followed them from town to town. Sadie never accepted a supporting role. Her training as an actress gave her presence, timing, and an instinct for risk. At Wyatt's side, she negotiated departures, shelters, and new beginnings, managed uncertain wins, repeated losses, and a reputation that opened doors one day and slammed them shut the next. What bound them together couldn't fit in a frame. It was a pact of the road, each holding up the other when the dust rose and the night closed in. Time proved what many doubted. The partnership survived changes of town, trade, and fortune, and lasted until Wyatt's death in 1929. Looking back, Sadie stands not just as a companion, but as the author of her own story, someone who chose, persisted, and carried the cost of her own decisions. Her journey shows that even where violence seemed to set the rules, there was still room for those who wrote their own script. In the trail she left, there is less myth and more work. The discipline of someone who, between bullets and curtains, turned her own name into a signature.